the unbelievable story of how a stolen identity led to tragedy. Welcome to Beneath the Surface, the Dark Side of Crime. Tonight, we dive deep into a chilling and unbelievable true crime story. A story that starts with a simple act of identity theft, but spirals into a web of tragedy, lies, and consequences that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about trust. Stay with us until the end. This one is bound to keep you on the edge of your seat. Chapter 1. A New Beginning. Natalie Hensley had never been one for small towns. Growing up in a fast-paced city, she'd always longed for a life of excitement and opportunity. But after a series of life-changing events that left her shattered, Clearwater Ridge offered the fresh start she so desperately needed. The town was quaint, far from the bustle of urban life, and full of friendly strangers whose lives appeared to be as simple as the rolling hills that surrounded them. Her new job at the local bank had allowed her to settle in quickly. A small house at the edge of town with a lush garden and quiet streets felt like the perfect sanctuary. And though Natalie knew she couldn't outrun her past forever, she told herself that this was the place where she could rebuild. But peace was fleeting. It began with an odd encounter at the local coffee shop. Natalie was sipping her cappuccino when a man, tall and confident in a well-tailored suit, took the seat next to hers. She didn't pay much attention to him at first, absorbed in a financial report she was reviewing for the bank. But when he spoke, his words sent a chill through her spine. "Excuse me," he said. "I believe we went to school together, Natalie Hensley." Her breath caught in her throat. She looked up at the man, trying to find a flicker of recognition. His sharp features and calm demeanor made her feel strangely uneasy. "I'm sorry, I don't think so," she replied, hoping it was just a misunderstanding. Her life was too complicated for this. She couldn't afford to reconnect with anyone from her past. But he persisted, his gaze intense as he studied her face. "No, I'm certain of it," he insisted, his voice lower now. "I remember you well." It was at that moment that the world seemed to shift under her feet. There was something in his eyes, something unsettling and insistent. And though she didn't recognize him, the way he said her name, so casually and yet so intimately, struck her deeply. "I think you're mistaken," Natalie said, her voice betraying a hint of panic. The man gave her a knowing smile, nodded politely, and stood up. "If you ever remember me, don't hesitate to reach out. My name is Jack Peterson." He left without another word, leaving Natalie with an uncomfortable gnawing feeling that only grew stronger as the days went by. Why would he say that? And why did his presence unsettle her so deeply? Chapter 2. Growing Suspicion. Days passed, but the unease Natalie felt after her encounter with Jack Peterson didn't subside. In fact, it grew. Everywhere she went, she thought she saw him. A glimpse of his figure at the grocery store, a flash of his shadow in the street late at night. She couldn't escape the nagging sensation that he was watching her. Her mind raced. Who was this man, really? How did he know her name? More importantly, why was he following her? She tried to rationalize it. Maybe he had mistaken her for someone else. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But the doubt lingered, clouding her thoughts. It wasn't long before she began receiving strange messages, anonymous texts and phone calls, all warning her to be careful. The first time she saw the message, it was simple. "I know who you really are, Natalie Hensley." She tried to dismiss it. But when the messages kept coming, Natalie knew she couldn't ignore the growing threat. There was something about this man, Jack Peterson, and his cryptic messages that sent her heart racing with fear. Then the letter arrived. No return address, no stamp, just a single line of text. "I know who you really are, Natalie Hensley." It was the same message she'd seen before, only this time it felt far more personal. A chill ran down her spine. How did he know? What did he want? Chapter 3. The search for answers. Desperate for answers, Natalie turned to the local sheriff's office. Sheriff Edward Harris, a man who had lived in Clearwater Ridge for his entire life, listened carefully to her story. But there was skepticism in his eyes. "Miss Hensley," he began, "I understand your fear. People have been known to get paranoid in small towns, especially when they're new and unfamiliar with the surroundings. But until we have concrete evidence, there's not much I can do." Natalie felt the weight of his words. He wasn't dismissing her concerns outright, but it was clear he didn't see the same level of urgency that she did. But Natalie had always trusted her instincts, and they were screaming that something was wrong. Something dark was lurking beneath the surface of this peaceful town, and she had to find out what it was. That night, she sat alone at her kitchen table, the dim light from a single lamp casting long shadows across the room. She opened her laptop and started searching for information. There had to be something, anything, that could explain why Jack Peterson knew her name. The search didn't take long. What she uncovered left her speechless. Jack Peterson wasn't who he said he was. His name was an alias. In fact, it was just one of many identities he had used over the years. Beneath that name, there was someone far more dangerous. The man behind the mask was Ryan Clark, a criminal who had been using stolen identities for years to cover his tracks. And among the identities he'd taken, one stood out above the rest: Natalie Hensley. Natalie felt a wave of nausea wash over her as she read through the files. Ryan Clark had assumed her identity and used it to erase his own criminal history. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. This man had been living her life. Every detail, every piece of information about her past had been stolen and twisted for his own purposes. Chapter 4. The true identity. Ryan Clark had always been a master of deception, leaving no trace of his true identity behind. As Natalie dug deeper, she learned more about his history, how he'd been involved in fraudulent schemes, identity theft, and even violent crimes. His ability to blend in, to become someone else, was unmatched. And now, it seemed, he was after her again. But why? Why had he come back to Clearwater Ridge? What was his endgame? Natalie knew she couldn't rest until she had answers. She couldn't afford to wait for the police to catch up. This was her life, and she had to take control. Chapter 5. The fear tightens. It wasn't long before Natalie began to notice Ryan's presence everywhere. He appeared in the background of her daily routine, his figure always lurking just out of sight. Every phone call she received, every knock at the door, left her heart racing. And then the threats escalated. Someone was watching her, but no one seemed to believe her. Sheriff Harris seemed dismissive, chalking it up to paranoia. But Natalie knew better. She could feel the walls closing in. Ryan Clark was closer than ever. Chapter 6. The Gathering. Storm Natalie knew it wasn't just paranoia anymore. She was being hunted. Each day, the tension grew. Her phone rang at odd hours, and when she answered, there was nothing but silence on the other end. In the quiet moments, she could feel someone watching her. She'd often catch a glimpse of a figure lurking in the shadows or see someone who looked too familiar, only for them to disappear before she could confront them. Her life had been turned upside down by a man she barely knew, and now she was certain. Ryan Clark was not only after her identity but was playing a deadly game with her mind. The fear was relentless, gnawing at her with every step she took. It had been weeks since she'd uncovered the truth about Ryan Clark's deception, but she couldn't escape the feeling that he was always one step ahead. It was as though he had orchestrated everything. This was a game, and Natalie was the pawn. She couldn't trust anyone. Sheriff Harris, who had dismissed her concerns, had no idea just how dangerous Ryan Clark truly was. No one in Clearwater Ridge understood the depth of the threat that had come to their quiet town. Late one night, Natalie received an encrypted message on her phone. The text was simple, but its chilling implications were enough to freeze her in place. "You're running out of time, Natalie. Her heart hammered in her chest. She knew, deep down, that Ryan was coming for her, coming for her life. Chapter 7. Confronting the Monster. The walls were closing in on Natalie, but she wasn't ready to give up. She had fought for too long to let this man take everything from her. She had to confront him, once and for all. The night was dark when she arrived at the address she had tracked down, a dilapidated building at the outskirts of town. The lights were off, but she knew he was inside. He always had a way of hiding in plain sight. As Natalie approached the building, she could hear the sound of footsteps behind her, followed by a whisper. "I knew you'd come." She spun around, her breath catching in her throat. There, standing in the shadows, was Ryan Clark. His face was familiar, yet unrecognizable. The man who had stolen her life was now standing before her, the very embodiment of her worst nightmare. "You've been looking for me, haven't you?" Ryan said, his voice low and mocking. He stepped closer, the shadow of his presence overwhelming. "Why?" Natalie's voice broke through the silence. "Why did you do this? Why my life?" Ryan grinned, a cold, calculating smile. "It was never about you, Natalie. It was about what you represented. A fresh start, a way to erase my past. You were the perfect choice." Natalie's chest tightened. "You've ruined everything. You've taken everything from me." Ryan's smile faded, and for the first time, he seemed to soften. "Maybe, but I've given you something in return." He stepped forward, his eyes gleaming. "You see, you never really knew who you were, did you? I gave you an identity that wasn't yours." Her heart raced as his words hit her with a new realization. You weren't just after my life. You were after my identity, my soul. You wanted me to lose myself completely." Ryan didn't respond immediately. He simply stared at her, his eyes cold and calculating. "It was never about you, Natalie. It was about survival." Chapter 8. The Final Showdown. The air between them crackled with tension. Natalie's pulse raced, her mind working overtime to think of a way out. She had to escape. There was no other option. But Ryan wasn't finished. "You're not going anywhere, Natalie," he said, his voice colder now. "I've worked too hard to let you go." The standoff lasted for what felt like an eternity, both of them locked in a silent battle of wills. But Natalie knew she couldn't let him win. Not now. Not after everything he had done to her. With a sudden burst of energy, she rushed forward, throwing herself against Ryan in a desperate attempt to break free. But his grip was ironclad. He caught her in mid-motion, his hands closing around her wrists. "You don't understand," Ryan hissed, his grip tightening. "I gave you everything you ever wanted, and now I'm taking it all back." Natalie struggled, but the fear and the shock of the situation paralyzed her for a moment. But then, a flash of clarity hit her. She had learned about Ryan's past, the crimes he had committed, the lies he had spun. She knew what he was capable of. With all the strength she had left, she kicked him in the shin, catching him off guard. His grip loosened for just a second. That was all she needed. Natalie broke free, sprinting out of the building and into the cold night air. She could hear Ryan's footsteps behind her, his anger echoing in the silence, but she didn't stop. She ran faster, pushing herself harder than she ever had in her life. Chapter 9. The Police. Close. And Natalie's heart pounded as she sprinted through the streets, the sound of Ryan's footsteps growing fainter behind her. Her legs burned, but she didn't dare stop. She had to get away. She had to survive. She made it to the police station just in time. Sheriff Harris was there, his eyes wide with confusion as she burst through the door. "Sheriff, Ryan Clark. He's... Her voice faltered, too breathless to continue. But Harris didn't waste any time. He grabbed the phone and made a quick call to his team. It wasn't long before officers were dispatched to the building where Ryan had been hiding. The waiting felt endless. Natalie paced back and forth, her mind racing as she thought of Ryan. What had he planned for her? What did he want? And then, finally, the door opened. 2 officers stepped in, Ryan Clark in tow, his hands cuffed behind his back. The man who had stolen her life, the man who had turned her world upside down, was finally caught. Chapter 10. Reclaiming the Life. The aftermath of the ordeal was a blur. Ryan Clark was arrested, and his criminal history came to light. He was charged with multiple counts of identity theft, fraud, and numerous other crimes. But for Natalie, the victory felt hollow. Though the town of Clearwater Ridge had returned to its quiet, peaceful existence, Natalie knew her life would never be the same. Her identity had been stolen, and the scars would never fully heal. But she had survived. She had fought back, and she had won. She was free. For the first time in years, Natalie felt like she was finally in control of her own story. Thank you for joining us tonight on Beneath the Surface, the Dark Side of Crime. Natalie's story is a sobering reminder of the dangers of identity theft and the power of deception. While the story may have ended with a sense of justice, the emotional toll it took on her cannot be understated. Let us know your thoughts on this case, and stay tuned for more stories that peel back the layers of crime, revealing the secrets hidden beneath the surface.